Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event, the conferment of the 2022 Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award, which will be followed by a scientific lecture about the winning article. I am Vernice Season, Publications and Media Officer of the Philippine Social Science Council, and I will be your host for today. Before we begin, let me read some reminders for our participants. First, during the open forum, attendees may send their questions through the Q&A panel for those joining in Zoom and the comments section for those joining on Facebook Live. Please avoid spamming the Q&A panel, Zoom chat box, and Facebook comments section with unnecessary and irrelevant messages. Please also note that the entire session is being recorded and that the recording will be available on our Facebook page and websites after the event. And lastly, e-certificates of attendance will be issued to attendees who will accomplish the online evaluation form. The link to this form will be posted towards the end of the event. Now, to formally welcome us to this morning's session and to introduce to us the Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award, let us listen to the opening message of the Executive Director of the Philippine Social Science Council. She was a professor of communication at the university, was also the former chair of the Board of Trustees of PSSC. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lourdes M. Fortis.
Good morning. I'm just trying to locate my talk. Wait, it got lost. Where is that? Okay, wait. It's supposed to be here. Sorry, anyway. All right, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, isa pong mapagpala at makabuluhang araw sa inyong lahat. Malugod po namin kayong tinatanggap sa napakahalagang okasyong ito. Today, we are once again honoring a social scientist who continuously pursue, generate, and disseminate social science wisdom, and this time on a pressing social problem that besets not only the country, but the world, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic. I warmly congratulate Dr. Gideon Lasco and his organization, Ugnayang Tao, led by its president, Dr. Skilty Labastilla, who penned the nomination letter for Dr. Lasco for this year's Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award. With this distinguished award. As you will see in the video later, winners of the VAM award come from the discipline of sociology. There are 4 of them, 2 from history and 1 each from demography, governance, and population studies. Now we add anthropology in the list because of Dr. Lasco. What is the Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award, or VAMERA? The answer you will find in this short video. All right. You know, the Board of Judges are distinguished scholars and critical social science experts who painstakingly read all 5 equally impressive articles and nominations. These nominations consist of 4 journal articles and a book chapter, 2 coming from the discipline of psychology, 1 each from social work, sociology, and anthropology. After the judges independently ranked their choices, Dr. Gideon Lasco's Living Together in Precarious Times, COVID-19 in the Philippines, published in Viral Loads, Anthropologies of Urgency in the Time of COVID by UCL Press, emerged as the winner. Let me read some of the comments of the judges in assessing the chapter. One said, this chapter is the best written of this year's submission. It focuses on a very current issue using contemporary frameworks and scholarship. It is enlightening, one that would interest younger generations of social scientists and those outside the social sciences. Any problem, Miguel? Meron tayong problema? Wala naman. Okay, sorry. All right. Another one said, Dr. Lasco's paper is illuminating as he delves into the connections between humans and non-humans and animate and inanimate objects in the environment. Indeed, to engage with non-humans is to be human. Finally, one judge commented, Dr. Lasco's writing is engaging while based on multiple theories. This could represent a new way to study anthropology in a crisis situation. As a fitting complement to our awardee, he will not only receive a cash prize, but will own a unique creation by visual artist Toym Imau, who designed the VAM trophy. In fabricating the trophy, artist Imau used welded metals finished in polyurethane. He artistically shaped the PSSC acronyms into flames to symbolize knowledge. All the letters or acronyms take the form of the element fire to further depict wisdom as an interminable pursuit among social scientists. Prominent in the trophy is a face almost shaped like a heart and whose eyes penetrate what is inside the brain and by extension, what is inside the soul. This is the face of the social scientist, and the metaphors of the heart and the eyes depict the social sciences that critically study events in society and their effects on its people. In particular, the heart represents the care and desire to be of service to society and to be concerned with the country's development. Ripples, connoting upward movements, the trophy stands tall for 2 reasons: to have a vantage point on social phenomena and to be visible, as in giving recognition to the efforts of the social sciences to contribute to Philippine communities' development. This VAM trophy is placed on a pedestal to represent such acknowledgement and gratitude as it is bestowed to the exceptional award. Now, apart from witnessing the conferment of the award, since 2020, PSSC has instituted a new feature, which is that of a lecture to be delivered by the awardee. I think that is what we have been waiting for. So ladies and gentlemen, as we present to you our awardee, I would like to give you a glimpse of who the person is. Gideon Lasco, MD, PhD, is a physician, medical anthropologist, and a writer. He is a senior lecturer at the Department of Anthropology, University of the Philippines, Diliman, an affiliate faculty of the College of Medicine, University of the Philippines, Manila, and a recipient of 2 fellowship grants from the Center for Criminology, Hong Kong University Research Fellowship for collaborative work on drug policy in Asia and the Philippines, and from the Ateneo de Manila University's Development Studies Program. He is a board member of Ugnayang Pang-Agham Tao, a regular member of PSSC. He was the lead qualitative researcher of RESPOND Hypertension Study, University of the Philippines, Manila, and senior health specialist of Ambition Health Project of the Ateneo School of Government. Being a prolific writer, he writes regularly for the Philippines Daily Enquirer and Sapiens, an Anthro magazine. He is a consultant of the Joint United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS, or UNAIDS, and has been one with ADB and International Center on Human Rights and Drug Policy, University of Essex Research. He has to his name several publications, which are too many to enumerate here. Just like I cannot enumerate his speaking engagements and attendance in international conferences, or I will spend the whole day reading this. I will just say that our awardee is truly an accomplished scholar and writer and a much sought-after speaker. Dr. Lasco's current research projects include studying medical populism during times of health crisis, documenting people's evolving perceptions and practices during the COVID-19 pandemic, analyzing the impacts of the drug wars in the Philippines and Asia, charting the meanings and materialities of human stature in the Philippines, understanding barriers to hypertension care, and making sense of young people's bodily and chemical practices. It is an honor on behalf of the Philippine Social Science Council to formally confer the 2022 Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award to Dr. Paul Gideon Lasco for his article, Living Together in Precarious Times, COVID-19 in the Philippines, published as part of the book, Viral Loads, Anthropologies of Urgency in the Time of COVID-19 by UCL Press. Maraming salamat po. Good morning, everyone. Mabuhay ang UGAT, mabuhay ang PSSC.
Thank you very much for your message, Dr. Pertus, and our heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Lasco. Now, to speak about Dr. Lasco's award-winning work, let me call on the president of Ugnayang Pang-Agham Tao. He teaches at the Ateneo de Manila University's Department of Sociology and Anthropology and Department of Interdisciplinary Studies. He is also a research associate at the Institute of Philippine Culture. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Skilty Labastilla.
Hello everyone. Magandang umaga sa lahat. Last November 2021, UGAT, or the Ugnayang Pang-Agham Tao Incorporated, nominated for the 2022 Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award, Gideon's book chapter, Living Together in Precarious Times, COVID-19 in the Philippines, published just a month or two prior, around September, if I'm not mistaken, in the University College London book, Viral Loads, Anthropologies of Urgency in the Time of COVID-19. Let me quickly share the cover of that book for you to see. So this is the book that contained Gideon's work. And I think it contains around 23 chapters, and Gideon's work, sorry, it's too small, appeared in the last part of the book, and his work was the only one from the Philippines, although there are several articles from Asia and other developing countries in this work. So I hope you get to read this full book as well. Gideon probably will tell you later how to access this book. So there, I'm just gonna stop sharing and continue my message. So in my nomination, I wrote, and I quote, "The UGAT believes that Dr. Lasco's original research, which uses multi-species perspectives, deftly elucidates on the human condition in the age of the COVID-19 pandemic by discussing the coronavirus within the larger constellation of relationships among humans, non-human animals, and plants. The chapter, even as it converses with cutting-edge scholarly work in the social and natural sciences, is written in a way that will inspire people beyond the academe to think more seriously about interspecies connections. Unquote. We in UGAT believe that first-rate scholarship has to go hand in hand with effective public communication. We have to continue discussing how we can communicate our work as social scientists, both to the wider public and to leaders and policymakers who can benefit from our insights and perhaps translate those insights to affect social change. And we're happy to say that Gideon is one of these effective communicators. Probably most of us know that he contributes a column regularly in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, following the footsteps of other UGAT elders like Dr. Michael Tan and Mary Racelis, who also regularly contributes to Rappler. Both Dr. Tan and Dr. Racelis, of course, have been mentors to many UGAT members, including Gideon. Gideon is also one of the star contributors to the well-regarded American anthropology website called Sapiens, which publishes anthropological and archaeological research to the wider public. And UGAT has partnered with Sapiens to train our members to do effective public science communication. I mentioned Prof. Racelis earlier, and I'd like to quote part of her congratulatory message to Gideon. I also saw Mary's name earlier, so Mary, I hope you don't mind if I quote you. Mary said in her message to Gideon, "I'm absolutely awed and super impressed by your paper. You show so vividly the links between the human and animal, plant, environmental, microbe/virus worlds. Starting off with the wandering ostriches as inadvertent street claimants, one of whose ultimate fate became adobo, was brilliant, funny, and insightful in pointing to meanings and connections. Your wide-ranging review of the literature is likewise astounding." Mary goes on to say, "What more can I say beyond expressing how much I learned by reading your article and what it has taught me about the dangers of remaining comfortable with current long-standing paradigms? You have made clear the need to reformulate non-human/human frameworks of interaction in evidence-based transformational ways. We in UGAT can be proud to have a member who has distinguished Philippine anthropology not only in this country, but on the world stage as well." End of quote. UGAT is one with Mary in being proud of Gideon's achievement, the first VAMERA for UGAT, and hopefully the beginning of many more. Congrats again, Gideon, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labastilla, for highlighting the importance and pertinency of Dr. Lasco's work. For those interested in getting a copy of the article, you may visit the UCL Press website, where a PDF copy of the book Viral Loads, Anthropologies of Urgency in the Time of COVID-19 is available for open access. The link will also be provided in the chat box and comment section. And now, without further ado, let us listen to the scientific lecture of our 2022 Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Awardee, Dr. Paul Gideon Lasco.
Thank you, Vernice. Thank you, PSSC. Dear friends, colleagues, fellow social scientists, it is with great privilege and joy that I join you today. Allow me, first and foremost, to express my gratitude to UGAT under the leadership of our President, Gideon Lasco, for the nomination that led to this recognition. To PSSC under the leadership of Dr. Lourdes Portus, both as an organization and also its various individual members, for being supportive of my work. And of course, to the Department of Anthropology in UP Diliman, as well as the Development Studies Program in Ateneo de Manila University, for hosting my scholarship over the years. I would also like to acknowledge Lenore Manderson, Ayo Wahlberg, and Nancy Burke for being wonderful editors. And my own chapter aside, I heartily recommend the whole book. It is open access, it's freely downloadable, given how it has gathered perspectives on the pandemic from around the world in an inclusive and incisive manner. To our elders, our mentors, all those who have come before us, I think I speak for the scholars in my generation in saying that thanks to your outreach and generosity, you have promoted a sense of belonging to the community of social scientists in the Philippines and a sense of inspiration, not just from your scholarship, but also from your public engagement and efforts towards community building. I add to these people, my own parents who have been, I believe they're joining us also today. I send them my love and appreciation for being so supportive of my career over the years. Over the past few weeks, I have been revisiting the work of Ma'am Jean Miralao. And aside from marveling at her scholarship, the scope and depth of her scholarship over the decades, I see in her work an engagement with contemporary issues that for me represents one of the critical roles of the Filipino social scientist today. In the case of Ma'am Jean, she charted the various contours of what she calls the social-cultural transformation of Philippine society, from the changing roles of NGOs to the Korean diaspora in the country, from changing sexual identities to the evolution of handicraft industries. Following this tradition, the past recipients of this award, some of whom, like Director Jail Cornelio, Nicole Corato, and Jonathan Ong, I have had the privilege to collaborate with, have likewise contributed to this body of work. In my case, my research has mostly revolved around documenting popular and political responses to contemporary health issues, from Rodrigo Duterte's genocidal drug war to vaccine scandals in the Philippines and beyond, and of course, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic is a moment where we see the different sciences, social, biomedical, physical, colliding in ways that have been at times productive and at times problematic. We are all medical anthropologists now, as a colleague told me, hinting at the greater recognition within anthropology of the need to engage with health issues. The brouhaha over face shields have seen engineers laying claim to epistemological authority over epidemiologists, but social scientists have the same authority too, given how wearing face shields is a cultural practice. And face shields, like so many other plastic barriers that we have seen throughout the past 2 years, are part of our material culture today. Will public health agencies and authorities finally recognize the value of the social sciences in helping them in their mandate, from promoting vaccines to communicating health promotions to different communities? Beyond such interdisciplinarity, realized or unrealized, the pandemic has shown us that we have to cross not just different specialties, but different species. This is the premise of the book chapter that I would like to revisit today, a book chapter that reflects a multi-species perspective that I have acquired over the years thanks to my teachers, my students, and experiences, both personal and professional. For one, I begin the chapter with an episode of an ostrich, something that I am sure many of you still remember, the runaway ostrich in Quezon City, and its transgressive act of breaking quarantine. When I say multi-species perspective, all it really entails is extending our existing methods and perspectives to include other species. Calling this approach passionate immersion, Van Duren and colleagues write, beyond viewing other creatures as mere symbols, resources, or backgrounds for the lives of humans, scholars in multi-species studies have aimed to provide thick accounts of the distinctive experiential worlds, modes of being, and biocultural attachment of other species. In fact, anthropology has always been multi-species, as the earliest ethnographic works would show. Much later, as the biological sciences were subjected to post-structural, including feminist critique, so were the categories that demarcate human and non-human boundaries, leading to more deliberate and more explicit multi-species ethnographies. Some of it has also been inspired by world anthropological currents, including from here in South America, where the likes of Viveros de Castro, who have borrowed indigenous concepts of transformation, have provocatively argued that humanity is a condition that a species ascribes unto itself, while animality is one that it ascribes to others. But, and I would like to dwell more on this perspective comes to us not just via these currents, but from our own national anthropology, likewise also borrowing from our own indigenous epistemologies. For instance, at the 2018 UGAT conference, the theme was our interconnectedness, doing anthropology in times of environmental crises. And the conference featured presentations that ranged from human seaweed relations in Tawi-Tawi and human elephant communications in a zoo to living with crocodiles in Palawan Island and with cats in urban settings. So these are some of the abstracts during that the very memorable conference in Puerto Princesa. The field of androzoology, espoused by scholars like the veterinarian and medical anthropologist Michael Tan, my mentor, both in his pedagogy and public engagement, has likewise called attention to how we live with other animals and ultimately how animal health and human health are inseparable. Responding to Pope Francis' recent comment that choosing pets over kids is selfish, he writes, "We have to avoid two extremes. On one hand, we are surrounded by all kinds of cruelty and neglect of pets. On the other extreme, we have to be asking ourselves too if it's morally justifiable to pamper pets on stuff like clothing and shoes and cologne and gourmet food. Even buying pet food always makes me feel guilty because they cost more than rice and human food." On a more personal note, let me add that my interest in this approach has been inspired by my own life, my love for the outdoors, how my travels, my hiking trips, and indeed my childhood in College of Forestry in UP Las Baños has given me a lifelong intimacy with so many other species. Visiting the Galapagos Islands shortly before the pandemic, for instance, I was shocked at the presence of so many unique species. And the only thing that really saved them from extinction was the fact that they were spared from human encounters until much later in the island's history. Quarantined with my parents in Los Baños months later, I would likewise be more attentive to the different species around us, from our two dogs to the sunbirds that have found home in my mother's bougainvilleas. Today, 2 years since the start of the pandemic, a multi-species perspective remains vital if we are to continually and more faithfully and critically account for the ongoing health crisis. Animals have continued to serve as our companions during times of isolation, and they participate in all domains of our pandemic life, from religion to politics. Such is the tenacity of these practices that in October 2020 and in 2021, the blessing of animals on the occasion of St. Francis of Assisi, they continued through drive-through blessing ceremonies, as this one, with one participant in this event quoted as saying, "We believe that it's for the long life also of our dog, and then also as Catholics, it's important to have them blessed as well, just like us." Much indeed has been said about how animals have helped us overcome isolation, how they have helped people overcome their mental health issues. But animals, as biological beings, are not immune, neither from the virus nor from human prejudice. Just recently, some hamsters in Hong Kong were detected to be positive for COVID. Investigators discovered that some hamsters from the Netherlands had in fact passed the virus to other hamsters and to one employee and one customer in a pet store. What raised the investigators' suspicion was the different genetic profile of the virus. Reminiscent of the culling or killing of 17 million minks in Denmark in 2020, Hong Kong acted decisively to cull or to kill 2,000 hamsters, leading to public outcry. As The Guardian narrated, local media was awash with footage and images of crying children saying goodbye to their hamsters, and interviews with people working to save them. Many spoke anonymously, their voices and faces disguised out of fear of retribution amid Hong Kong's worsening security crackdown. In the Philippines, we lack the resources to test animals for COVID, but such is the precarity of animal companions that the Philippine Animal Welfare Society has had to issue an appeal for people not to abandon or shun pets of COVID-19 patients. From their website, I quote, "We continue to receive requests via email to take in the pets of people who are abandoned or who have died of COVID-19. Please do not abandon your pets or the pets left behind by those who passed away. Orphaned companion animals may still be safely taken in by relatives and friends of the deceased." Equally distressing is to see how zoo animals have further suffered due to the failure of animal operators to feed them well, citing lack of revenues due to the protracted lockdown, including this poor lion. At Zuri, as one report puts it, a frightfully thin lioness approached a shallow pool of green slime inside a barren, filthy enclosure, while her partner, a sickly lion inside a haggard frame, looked on. These heartbreaking realities were just some of the horrific conditions documented in 5 zoos in the Philippines that span from malnourished animals left without access to clean food or water to chained big cats pacing in circles inside filthy and inadequate enclosures. Meanwhile, the COVIDization of healthcare has continued to disrupt healthcare for non-COVID cases, not just for humans, but for animals. So much so that throughout the pandemic, veterinarians have found themselves arguing for their frontliner status in a reminder that animals get sick too. As Michael Tan wrote, to go back to androzoology, like humans, dogs and cats suffer more of the lifestyle diseases humans have: obesity, diabetes, heart disease. But advances in veterinary medicine have generally given our four-footed friends a longer lifespan. Their participation in human lifestyles may have guaranteed them a survival of the cutest, but it has also rendered them vulnerable to all kinds of illness. As for the plant boom, what has happened? When I see Angelica Panginiban surrounded by plants, as she reminds people, wag mong paloko, we see that plants have indelibly changed our virtual and physical landscapes from Zoom backgrounds to living rooms and backyards. But many others have since lost interest in plants. One of my friends who in the height of the pandemic amassed so much caudex, the species of bulbous plants at the height of the lockdown, some of it, he confessed, have since died. What of the communities that rushed to poach the monstera in their vicinity and all the alocasia, that family of Gabi in the mountains, which in 2020 fetched tens of thousands of pesos? What happened to them? Whether sustained or evanescent, such valuation and monetization in certain plants, once deemed part of the landscape, especially amid times of insecurity, have surely had an effect in their communities. In 2020, at the height of the plant boom, several DNR offices warned of protected areas being at risk of being trampled upon by plant poachers. If nothing else, the plant boom goes to show how the capriciousness of human desires, our fads, our fashions, can involve other species, be it pets, plants, or even bacterial culture to make kombucha or sourdough bread. Thankfully, some plants have a way of sustaining themselves even without human hands, even without selfies that make them popular, but other species are not that fortunate. As for the virus itself, it has since evolved into different variants from Alpha to Delta to Omicron, and we are moving past Omicron. Our immunities, both from vaccines and past infections, have arguably placed us in a better position to eventually regard coronavirus as endemic, while the islands and territories that have shut themselves, the countries that were initially successful, are now more immunologically naive. But at what cost? Governments now say that we should learn to live with the virus, but anthropologists will be quick to say that in fact we have been living with different viruses, living with different microbes for a long time. In fact, within each of us, as microbiologists now recognize, it is estimated that there are trillions, 39 trillion in one estimate, microbial cells, including bacteria, viruses, and fungi that live on us and in us. New research is suggesting that our daily activities, including eating and sleeping, requires being synchronous with all the bacteria in our bodies. And of course, antibiotics, including the ones people have indiscriminately consumed out of fear of COVID, can disrupt this balance. As the pandemic recedes from people's consciousness, the obsession over disinfecting everything around us, from vegetables to vehicles, is once again fading away, while the good bacteria of Yakult and other probiotics is in greater demand as ever, as my medical anthropology students attest. So far, I have given snippets of how different species, just a few out of many, figure in our everyday lives. However, just as intimately observing human-to-human relations can obscure structural and political economic factors, so can human-animal relations viewed in that same degree of magnification. So can it lead to, in the words of the late great Paul Farmer, detract attention to structural violence that characterizes not just the inequity of societies around the world, but of our planet in crisis, of the so-called Anthropocene. We need to look at not just at animals, not just of plants, but of rivers, forests, entire ecosystems, and of course, the political ecologies that determine their fates. As the anthropologist Efenita Takebat, my colleague in the Department of Anthropology, and I wrote in an article opposing the proposed PAREX that would have been built over Pasig River. As we said, our legal system will do well to adopt what our ancestors have known all along. We recognize the personalities of corporations, judicial entities that enjoy rights and protection. But that which sustains us, rivers, mountains, nature, we regard simply as resources. We see this as translated into government policies that push for the opening of mining projects and the expansion of agro-industrial complexes that raise down forests and destroy biodiversity. Time and again, they have been proven not to benefit the people, but rather the interests of businesses. Held in this light, my friends, the upcoming elections likewise deserve a critical multi-species gaze. On the superficial level, of course, we can see how animals humanize candidates. And many of our politicians have had their viral moments with their dogs and their cats. Plants likewise help paint our relatable figures, and many a candidate has declared themselves to be plantitos and plantitas. But much more is at stake in the elections. In the same way that, to reference a great evil happening today, the 1986 Chernobyl disaster in Ukraine turned animals and plants alike radioactive, increased mutations, but also unwittingly created a zone of wilderness where different species are having a resurgence, free from human intervention. So much is at stake in our politics. And even today, pets accompany their humans in subways and bomb shelters in Kiev. Notably, very few candidates have really spoken about the climate crisis, and many are comfortable with oxymorons like clean coal and responsible mining. And many are equally comfortable with notions of neutrality or passivity, be it in geopolitics or global environmental action. This brings me to a piece that I wrote before the last presidential election, 2016, and I would like to quote today as I draw to a close. Trees would make good citizens. They don't move around, making them easy to survey. They pay taxes to the ecosystem in the form of the oxygen they release, the carbon they sequester, the wildlife they sustain, and the communities they make cleaner and greener. They don't post nasty things on Facebook or stage rallies on EDSA. They don't complain, even when they're about to die, and some philosophers relegate their dying sound to the realm of unperceived existence. Rightfully, we think of elections as being about the fate of Filipinos as a nation. But whoever gets elected as our next president will also have stewardship over our several thousands of islands, the countless mountains, the millions of hectares of forests and coral reefs, and all their inhabitants. All of this will be under his or her oversight. The recent killing of the Philippine eagle pamana is illustrative of how our biodiversity has suffered. The cloud rats, the tamarao, sea turtles, and giant clams have all dwindled, hunted down with impunity, defenseless against poachers, both local and foreign. At the rate that we're going, many rare species may become extinct even before we set our eyes on them. Which is why I am worried that the environment is not at the forefront of our national conversation. These candidates may be larger than life, but life is larger than them. Not just the life that we have, but the life world we share with the rest of creation. So in ending, in light of these words, I ask, as we face an ever more uncertain political and epidemiological future, as specters of the past threaten our tomorrow, I ask, can we as social scientists illustrate and interrogate our interconnectedness with other species? Can we inform and inspire a politics that goes beyond our human needs and wants? We have come a long way from Noah's Ark, from Bugan and Wigan, from the balangays and galleons that transported rice and root crops, coffee and corn, mosquitoes and mice, hogs and horses. But amid our ever-changing world, a planet in crisis, but one that may yet be redeemed, may we continue to bear witness to a simple truth, that we are on the same boat. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you very much for your lecture, Dr. Lasco. And again, we congratulate you sincerely on your award. Let us now proceed to the next part of our program. We now invite questions from our audience so that they can join the discussion. For those joining in Zoom, you may place your questions in the Q&A box. For those in Facebook Live, you may send your questions through the through the comment section of the live video. Mhm. Okay, so our first question comes from Marielle June Magsino. Given your example photos, Dr. Lasco, can we use such photos in determining the effect to someone's emotion, for example, using the photo voice method?
Thank you, Marielle. Yes, absolutely. I think that this set of perspectives that looks at different species welcomes all kinds of methodological innovations, and photo voice, of course, is one of them. So there is really a lot of openness in terms of experimentation, of tinkering with different kinds of methodologies. So it's definitely something that I would think is quite appropriate, especially since, according to the same scholars I cited earlier, who talked about passionate immersion, they also mentioned that these same scholars have spent time in the field interviewing and observing scientists and the plants, animals, fungi, and microbes that interest them. So getting some of these people who are involved in these different human-animal relations, getting them to take pictures or even videos of their experiences is definitely something to be considered, worth considering.
Mm, I see. It seems you don't have any more questions. Well, I have a question, Dr. Lasco. Well, maybe for someone like me who is a part of the youth sector, I was wondering, given your lecture today, what can we do as the youth to help, non-human, to help animals, to help plants during the time of COVID-19?
Thank you. I think that in many ways, our young people today are very much fascinated with all kinds of animals. I would say that young people today love the idea of different species. Uh, they many like sharing pictures of their pets. Even my students, when I ask them to share about kamusta na kayo, they keep posting pictures of their cats, their dogs, and of course we see social media is always lit up by different memes involving animals. And of course, an increasing number of young people today are also going to the outdoors, exploring the outdoors, appreciating nature, going beyond the city. But at the same time, this appreciation must lead to awareness, which in turn should lead to advocacy. So there is a challenge there for us. How do we bridge this interest? How do we connect young people from being interested in different species in general to something that is more engaged and something that beyond protecting their pets, of course, everyone will protect their pets, but how do we get people to realize that we need to defend, we need to act? There's a politics in this as well. We need to clamor for protection of habitats. We need to clamor for protection of biodiversity. So I think that's the challenge. And by depicting these accounts of human non-human relations, we can contribute to creating an interdisciplinary movement towards promoting this.
But definitely no. There is a need for appreciation to translate into actual action from us. So we have more questions coming in from Dr. Mary Roselli. Dr. Lasco, as you have been in Latin America, can you bring us up to date on developments among anthropologists there who, like you, are in the forefront of this multi-sectoral transformative thinking?
Well, I believe that there's so much parallel, Mary, between what's happening in the Philippines and what's happening in, for example, Mexico and Colombia, the countries that I have been during this past year. And like here in Colombia, for example, over 200, I believe, environmental defenders have been killed in the past year alone. So there's a lot of violence involving nature, involving the environment. And I think many anthropologists have been at the forefront of realizing that beyond the animals that are there, beyond the forests, we need to also really foreground the defenders of these habitats. And of course, we see that the Amazon has been a contested field. Bolsonaro's policies have basically rendered the lungs of the world, the Amazon, vulnerable to further exploitation. And anthropologists are also at the forefront of challenging this kind of exploitative approach.
Thank you for that. Another question from Luis Emmanuel Ebasamis. Aside from COVID-19 and the climate crisis, what other Philippine contemporary health issues can the multi-species approach be especially relevant to?
I believe that practically all our health issues are relatable to some kind of engagement with animals. For example, even our non-communicable diseases like hypertension, studies show, for example, that living with dogs can demonstrably lower people's blood pressure by a certain amount. So living with pets can help people cope with chronic illness, which is an important concern for our time. But at the same time, we see how different animals continue to be vectors of disease. Leptospirosis remains a concern, and it will even be more of a concern in the Philippines as we become more vulnerable to floods because of the climate crisis. So I think that accounting for the animals that live with us, not just the pets that we have, but rodents that live in our cities, but also the wildlife that we encounter, and the wildlife that's being traded within the region, like pangolins in Palawan, all of them have to be part of our thinking. So this One Health approach, I think, is very important because it recognizes the inseparability between human health and animal health.
Okay. Okay. Jumping off from that, John Angel Bautista asks, do you think that giving non-humans, referring to animals, plants, and other non-living entities, do you think that giving them legal personalities would somehow help?
Absolutely. I believe so. I wrote a column entitled Rivers as Living Beings last year. And I referenced different countries like Bangladesh, for example, in 2019. The Supreme Court mentioned a rule that rivers are living entities that are entitled to legal rights, including the right to life. And then in Ecuador, at the same time, in 2008, they rewrote their constitution to recognize the legal rights of mountains and rivers.
Mm-hmm.
So some of people might dismiss this as a mere kind of feel-good environmental personhood. However, however, this actually translated, these legal rights in some settings have translated to real life protection. So for example, I believe in Ecuador, when one province approved a project that would have been destroyed a river, a judge ruled in favor of the Vilbacamba River,
Mm-hmm.
citing its rights. So I believe so that it does. We need to consider that as well, and we need to acknowledge indigenous peoples for gifting us with these important concepts.
Okay. Okay. I see we have another question po from Mary Roselis. Are there gender issues in the animal world that gives us insights into human behavior and vice versa?
Definitely, I'm reminded, Mary, of Manny Pacquiao's comment that
I see.
of citing animals as ano ba yung sinabi nga ni Manny Pacquiao? I think he infamously said back then that gay people are worse than animals. Saying that ang tinanong ni Manny is, have you seen any animal having male to male or female to female relations? He asked. Sabi niya na if you have male to male or female to female relationships, then people are worse than animals. Well, actually, many animals have been observed or interpreted to exhibit homosexual behavior, as biologists have observed. On the other hand, some scientists have cautioned against interpreting animal behavior as homosexuality, as is understood by our societies, because otherwise, some have argued that otherwise people would also have to justify acts like rape, cannibalism, and infanticide that are common in animal kingdom. So it's interesting how people look at animal behavior as some kind of measure, as some kind of reference point for human behavior. And in terms of gender issues, I'm sure that there's also so much that can be gleaned from discourses around dogs. I wrote an essay last year about how the discourse around the askal in the Philippines mirrors how we think about race in the country. So I believe that a similar perspective can yield some productive insights as well. So, ayun, yun lang masasabi ko for now. But I think it's a very important question.
As I would agree, I see na ang dami nating matututunan from animals and how it is in harmony with how us humans act. Maybe going into a more political question. An anonymous attendee asked, in your opinion, do you think it's time for social scientists to be a part of the IATF? And if yes, what would be their possible roles in addressing the pandemic?
Thank you. I believe that from the very beginning, the social scientists should have been involved in looking at how people respond, in looking at questions of equity, for example, in looking at how different responses can impact different communities differently, from indigenous peoples to urban poor communities. We deserve to hear how people have been impacted based on their positionality, based on their backgrounds. And of course, we need social scientists to help us with communications, with how to communicate. I think our public anthropologists like Michael Tan, Mary Reselis have been very active in talking about this. Also, activists like Josh San Pedro, who's a physician and anthropologist. So we have seen many of our social scientists, Nina Castillo, for example, assert the importance of the social sciences. And we should therefore document this moment as an argument for the future. Like, we need to preempt the imbalance of expertise in the future. And we need to show the shortcomings of the failure to include social scientists today, so that we can argue for a more inclusive consultations in the future.
Yes, definitely, definitely, we need a more mixed, maybe, composition for our Senate and our government officials.
And let me also add that we need historians to remind us that many of our responses are in fact not episodic, but actually our responses are familiar. Some of the responses that we saw today, or we're seeing today, are very similar to how people responded during the SARS outbreak in 2003. The stigmatization of nurses, of healthcare workers. We saw that in 2003 in Alabang and in other places at the height of the SARS outbreak. That's been forgotten. So we need to also engage with historians. We need to engage with sociologists who look at different aspects of the pandemic, from death to religion to everyday life, to how children are faring, to how senior citizens are faring. And of course, we need political scientists to call out what Randy David has called the optics of power in the pandemic response.
Definitely. And seeing the current state of the IATF, we need more social science research also to back up the current data and the current policies that they are enacting. Well, another question we have that's quite interesting. What are your current thoughts about the future extending to multi-species anthropology for lifeless spaces beyond Earth? For example, our space or new frontiers like Mars.
Thank you for that.
Hi, my name is Leo.
Thank you for that fascinating question. In fact, last year, 2 years ago na almost, there was this report, the suspicion among the scientific community that there might be life on Venus on the basis of seeing phosphine, seeing the chemical compound phosphine in the clouds of Venus. So what's fascinating when I started writing about it is that I learned that there are actually anthropologists who are at the forefront of an anthropology of outer space. So according to this essay by Deborah Battaglia and colleagues in 2015, sabi nila, and I quote, "Humans incorporate entire universes in their worlds." So these anthropologists, rather than assuming the universality of a Euro-American worldview that places humans at the center, these anthropologists have explored how cultures locate the place of humans in relation to other cosmologies, which includes animals, gods, demons, and other entities in this world and beyond. In other words, what they're suggesting is that many indigenous worldviews have in fact have always been open to the possibility of life elsewhere, diba? Yung tinatawag na netherworld or tinatawag na parang ilalim, ibabaw, the Austronesian view. So, and more recently, also we have anthropologists looking at astrobiology, looking at how scientists looking at Antarctica, looking at all these extreme locations. So there's a very rich body of work that are looking at astrobiology, which I think is quite fascinating. So, let me quote from what I wrote back then after reading all this literature. I said that as we navigate a cosmos filled with other forms of existence, imagined and real, large and small, past and present, these words of the science fiction writer Xixin Liu of China are worth bearing in mind. The universe is big, but life is bigger.
Those are very, very fascinating thoughts. I was not aware even of those concepts. And very interesting to note that we really are, will note our position or our location in the world. Going back, Mr. Engelbert Baloloy has a question. How will you assess national government pandemic response in terms of human dignity and freedom?
Well, there's so many ways to answer that, but just to offer one response, I think that the government has really focused on responsibilizing individuals. So, meaning to say that the burden of the pandemic response has been focused mostly on individuals. So, do this, do that. Huwag kayong magsama-sama, magsuot kayo ng face shield, magsuot kayo ng face mask. All of these are individual level responses. And that's fair enough. We need to do our fair share of responding to a health crisis. But less attention has been placed on government level responses. For example, ensuring ventilation in public spaces, creating policies, enabling environments for people to gather outdoors safely. These have been neglected. And in a way, it's been a continuation from this neoliberal view of health that's really at the level of individual. So pag sinabing diabetes, rabies even, so to connect this to the human-animal relations, when we look at issues like rabies, the burden, the responsibility is on the individual to take care of your pets or make sure that they won't go astray. But there are also very important community level responses to make sure that dogs are safe and there's control of animals through programs like spaying, through free, ang mahal ng rabies vaccines, which is why many people don't get them. So the responsibilization of the individual, which we see throughout many policies, many programs in health and beyond, were magnified during the pandemic, I would say.
Okay po. Well, another question from an anonymous attendee. He or she, well, they say that they are an aspiring social scientist and they would like to ask that seeing how the country is struggling from COVID and the poor response of the administration and our leaders, in your opinion, how can social sciences help in understanding the social aspect on crises like pandemic? In what way can we communicate our findings and work to the general public and the government?
This has always been a great challenge. This is the same questions that have been asked about the drug war, for example. How do we interrogate the drug war from the perspective of the social sciences? So I would respond by saying that we need to persevere in the work that we've been doing. All of these researches that are done, whether now or in the past, will contribute to arguments, will contribute to creating a body of work that can then be used to challenge government responses. I've seen this happen in the pandemic and even before, even the drug war, that having some kind of journal article to refer to can greatly magnify our arguments. But of course, we have to also understand that we also need to reach the public, and it's a challenge to sometimes communicate our findings to the public. Sometimes we have to take matters in our hands. So we've seen our fellow social scientists, we've seen them go to venues like the Inquirer, Rappler, even social media to engage with people. And I think that's very important. It's also important to work with journalists, to work with filmmakers, to work with creatives, with artists to help bridge our message across. And of course, teaching itself has such a powerful effect. If you have 30 students and they have their families, they have their communities, we cannot underestimate the power of pedagogy in helping change people's minds. So we should not underestimate the power of the different things that we do as academics. And if you're an aspiring social scientist, I definitely encourage you to continue. We need more social scientists because there's so many things to document, there's so many things to challenge, and it's also a very meaningful way of life to devote a life in doing these things. So I think we should not give up. And let me also answer, I see the Q&A. So Glenford Tolentino has asked, how would you handle the case of Leonard Ko, who of course is one of the heroes of botany in the Philippines, who was victim of red tagging, and Chad Book. So I am so much in solidarity with everyone who are clamoring for justice. It's been many years since Leonard Ko has been killed in Eastern Visayas. So it's unacceptable for this to happen. And we need to recognize that the scientific community must really rally as one community in these instances because, di ba, sabi nga nila, first they came for the journalists and then no one was left. So I think what's happening now is that they're trying to silence different forms of expression, including academic expression, and we must fight vigorously to defend this freedom that we hold dear. I can say whatever I want in this venue, and that we should not never take that for granted. And we should also extend our, if we talk about multi-species ethnography, we should also extend our gaze, our analysis to include the environmental defenders, the people who are involved in going to the field, a different kind of field, but one that is where much is at stake. So I'm in solidarity with, and of course, Chad Book, it really saddens me. His death, I know him personally, so this is something unacceptable.
Yes, but definitely. I also actually know Chad personally, teacher Chad and teacher Joreen, and their recent massacre. Maybe moving forward, Lance Romulus Dairit asks, using the multi-species approach, how can we persuasively convince as well as educate policymakers and even ordinary citizens of the interconnectedness of our existence and other species in order to avert future health crises and maintain ecological homeostasis?
So thank you, Lance, who's one of my students, I believe, in medical anthropology. So I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see you here. So yes, I think that the first step is to build alliances, tactical and strategic alliances with the different sciences. Because when we talk about multi-species approaches, then that inevitably leads us to forging alliances with the people who are also working with these species in very different ways. So building on the knowledge that we produce together, the knowledge that we discover independently and together with different scientists, we need to make sure that our accounts are not just left to arcane articles, but we should make sure that they're communicated to the public. So very important dito yung pagtingin sa mga potential na mga avenues, like of course public anthropologies I mentioned, writing articles, but also visual anthropology, looking at how film can look at different species in a way that can be more compelling to many audiences. Photography as well. I have had a privilege of working with wildlife photographers, and they have shared with me how much impact they've had in really raising awareness about different species, and even receiving threats from people because their photography is so powerful that it makes people afraid. So we need to work with artists, we need to work with photographers, visual filmmakers again, and we need to challenge ourselves to make our writing better. Maybe we're writing in a way that's not accessible, and that should be a personal challenge to us.
Vern, there is one question that we missed, no? But pampasaya itong tanong na ito. Ang tanong, are you interested in politics? I think we need one like you in the Senate.
I'm not interested in politics. But I recognize, and I think many of us do, that there's politics in our academic work, and I have the research agenda that I have embarked upon over the past few years have involved the drug war, so documenting how young people have been affected by the drug war, documenting the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think the decision to pursue these topics is in itself political, in the sense that I'm aware that this is important work that can help challenge authority and can also inform authority, can advise politics. So I think that that's very important as well.
See, and very much duly noted po. Well, I see that's all the time we have for the open forum. Again, thank you very much to everyone who participated in the discussion. Thank you also, Dr. Lasco, and congratulations again on your award. Now, before we end this morning's event, we are privileged to be in the presence of the woman after whom the VAMERA Excellence in Research Award is named. She was the executive director of PSSC from 1996 to 2009, and she was also the Secretary General of the Philippines National Commission for UNESCO from 2011 to 2015. Earlier in her career, she taught at the University East, the University of the Philippines, and Ateneo de Manila University. In 1983 to 1988, she headed the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation's research group. She was also a committed researcher in the field of sociology and has authored and edited numerous publications, articles, and academic pieces. Ladies and gentlemen, here to give a congratulatory message is Dr. Virginia A. Miralao.
Thank you very much, Bernice, and good morning, dear friends. It's my first time to attend a presentation, this kind of presentation for the VAM Award, and I congratulate PSSC for introducing this new format. I am happy to be here with you and to finally listen to one of the presentations that is now being made. First, maybe I should mention that together with all the other congratulatory messages that have been given to Gideon, I join in this congratulations. I have read the paper myself and have found it very impressive, really in terms of content, in terms of organization, scholarship, and the writing style is really very engaging. And now, having heard Gideon present his paper or make this paper presentation before us today, I am even more impressed. And I'm very confident that Gideon will really stand shoulder to shoulder with all other young scientists in the region and in the world today to represent the Philippine social sciences. It's really not my, I have earlier congratulated Gideon by email, because a few days earlier we were introduced to one another by a common friend. And so I am waiting for the time when he gets back here so that we will be able to meet each other personally. I think what is really important is that younger generations of Filipino social scientists continue to do this good work and continue to be interested in research, because it's only by doing this and being engaged and being, as Gideon says, we can do so much by engaging in our own social sciences. We do not need to enter politics all the time, because there are many things that we can do in an excellent way and in a way that meaningfully contributes to society within the, what we call this, within the confines, but not really confines, but within the directions of our social sciences. So I really hope that this award that has been established by Dr. Aquino in my name will continue to inspire young scientists like Gideon and the other members of the PSSC's member associations. I also would like to congratulate Skilty and UGAT for this nomination. And I have not met Skilty, but I hope I will have the opportunity sometime to come visit PSSC and meet you all in person. So thank you again and congratulations, Gideon. We hope that with this VAM award, we are able to contribute to what we would like to see in the Philippine social sciences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miralao. And now, as we are nearing the end of this event, may I call on the immediate past chairperson of the PSSC Board of Trustees. She was a former board member of the Ugnayang Pang-Agham Tao and the former director of the University of the Philippines Center for International Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to Dr. Cynthia Neri Zayas for her closing remarks.
Maraming salamat. Naririnig niyo ba ako?
Opo.
Okay. Nais kong batiin si Dr. Gideon Lasco sa kanyang Gawad VAM Excellence Award. Isang malaking karangalan ito sa mga antropologo at sa asosasyong kinabibilangan ni Dr. Lasco, ang UGAT, Ugnayang Pang-Agham Tao. Tulad niya, ako rin ay isang kasapi nito, kaya proud din ako. Maligayang bati sa iyo muli, Dr. Lasco. Ang multi-species approach sa antropolohiya ay karugtong ng ating interes sa ILK, Indigenous Local Knowledge at Biodiversity Studies sa mga katutubong Pilipino IPs. Naway, maengganyo ang mga kabataang antropologo na ipagpatuloy ang tema ng tao, hayop, kalikasan, hayop, tao, lalo na sa mga katutubong kababayan natin. Tandaan natin, ang PSSC ay handang sumuporta sa ganitong mga adikain. Nagtangka kaming magtayo ng IP Center. Baka sakaling mapondohan at magka-interes ang marami dito. Programa ng PSSC ay laging bukas sa mga ganitong pag-aaral. Tuloy natin ang accounting for animals sa ating mga ethnography. Maraming salamat sa iyo muli, Dr. Gideon Lasco.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Zayas. And now we are at the tail end of our program. First of all, we would like to thank our distinguished speaker and awardee, Dr. Gideon Lasco, for sharing with us his award-winning and very much relevant work, Living Together in Precarious Times, COVID-19 in the Philippines. Again, we congratulate you on your achievement. We also thank Dr. Virginia Miralao, Mr. Skilty Bastilla, and Dr. Cynthia Zayas for gracing this event. We also thank the officers and staff of the Philippine Social Science Council who worked on the preparations and behind the scenes of this event. We also thank our viewers today for joining this timely and very much relevant discussion. We request you all to send us your feedback on this session to help us improve on our future event offerings. The link to the online evaluation form is now flashed on your screens and will be posted in the chat box and the comment section of the Facebook Live video. Please note that only those who are able to accomplish the form by 5 p.m. today will receive an e-certificate of attendance for this event. Now, for those who would like to view this event again, a recording will be available shortly on our Facebook page and eventually on the PSSC website. Please also tune into our page for announcement on future webinars and other PSSC activities. Now, this ends the program for the 2022 Virginia A. Miralao Excellence in Research Award Conferment and Scientific Lecture. Again, thank you very much and good day. Mabuhay!